To an XpoNorth workshop with Pauline Moore, the radio and podcast producer. I'm so happy to see everybody. Hi, Katie. Hi, Sarah. Hey, Callum. Hey, Brian. Hey, Colin. I know you're probably going to want to hear from Pauline, and we don't have loads of time, so I'm going to make this really quick. Pauline and I go way back. Pauline, I'm so excited that you're doing this with us. She's one of the most talented story producers I know, who does it for both radio and podcasts. And in preparation, I was like, okay, I'll just quickly do a sentence about her. But she's so impressive. I'm just going to read you some of the things that she's done. I hope I don't embarrass you, Pauline. But she has more than 30 years experience, so you're in good hands, with radio, mostly BBC Northern Ireland and Scotland. But she's also done Radio 4 and The World Service, both on air and the behind the scenes production. Recently, she's gone on to podcasting. She's done True Crime, The Strange Death of Innes Ewart. And by the way, it's amazing. I've listened to the whole thing. I'm hooked. I really hope there's a second parter so you can follow up with that story, Pauline. It's so good. She's also followed the Alex Salmond trial for BBC Sounds. Has anyone listened to Tartan Noir recently? Yes, it's also really, really good. So she's producing that show and co-hosting Talking Dairy Girls, which is my ultimate favorite, which if anyone's seen the Dairy Girls sitcom, you can follow along. And these are real Dairy Girls that you can listen to and comment on. And she produces that for The Big Light. And she also has loads of stuff in development. Pauline, we're so excited to have you here today to talk all things storytelling and podcasts. And I am also going to fade away into the background, but if needed, I am here.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Jessica. Jessica also didn't tell you that we were involved in a Wigtown Radio, which was for the festival, and we blethered to people in that and sang along to things. That was a good while ago. You're all very welcome. And thank you very much for sending a bit of information beforehand, because I was able to then go and have a bit of a nosy and see what was going on, or what on your websites and things, what you were up to. So that sort of has guided me in some thoughts of, what you're wanting to do with podcast. I have notes, so I'll probably rustle a wee bit and look. And I just thought I would tell you a wee bit, you've heard about me, so not too much about me. I've been interested in recording audio since a very young child, and I've had my first cassette recorder, and I used to hide behind settees and record conversations. So I sort of think that was maybe a very, very early entry into podcasting, because I think of podcasting as really sort of like joining a conversation. That it's a conversation that's continuing, and your listener is sort of coming into it. And what you're really trying to do with the podcast as well is build a community of listeners, and also a community of people who are involved, so that they sort of talk to each other. So those are sort of the overarching things that to bear in mind. And I did do out some points. Just what I'll do is I'll tell you them now, so that you can maybe even just scribble them down or something, so that when I come to talk to each of you about your own ideas, it's worth just having that sort of framework. So as I said, mentioned about community. So I'll give you about 5 or 6, and they'll come out when we're talking. Is one of the first ones is why? Why do you want to do a podcast? What's your motivation for this? Why a podcast? Why not something else? And number 2 is reality. Is how long it takes. It's quite a commitment if you're wanting to start a podcast, and once you start it, it just keeps going. It's you think you've got one episode done, and then there's the next, and then there's the next, and it can take over your life a bit. So that's why the reality of it. What's the focus? What do you want to talk about? What is the point of your podcast? What is the focus? Names really matter. What are you going to call it? This is something that takes quite a long time. It took us weeks to come up with the title Talking Dairy Girls. And it sounds so simple, but we went through all different combinations of what we could possibly call it, and settled on that. And I'll talk a wee bit about that as we go along, but it's us talking about the sitcom Derry Girls, but it's also us telling stories about our experience of the 90s in Derry. So it's me and two other people I worked with in Derry during the 90s when the sitcom was based. I don't know, did any of you, have you watched it? Have you seen Derry Girls? Right, so, well, the podcast is out there. So yeah, names really matter. What's your format? How are you wanting to make this podcast? You know, what is it? Is it interviews? Is it going to be like a documentary style? Is it very casual? Is it informative? So think, it's just to think, how can you format this? And then intros and outros for podcasts. Now that's something you'd think, well, maybe that comes further down the line, but it's actually worth thinking about right from the beginning when you're thinking of your content and your format. And also then there's other things, that thumbnails, pictures, music, which, that's something to consider, but that's not, maybe we haven't time to get into that today. And equipment and platforms. Again, the sky's the limit with equipment. You can make a podcast using your phone and cheap and free editing facilities. Anyone can load up a podcast on Apple or Spotify for free. So it's really what you want it to do. And it's also quite good to maybe just try out and see what you're comfortable with before you invest a lot of money. I don't have a lot of equipment to do it. I do radio production. So I do have software that I've paid for because I need the support sometimes. I do have recording equipment, a Zoom recorder, not Zoom on here, but a Zoom recorder that I take out because I do a lot of out on the field recording for documentaries as well. So I use that quite a lot. And there's tricks that you can do as well to get the best sound quality that you can. So if you like, those are, there's sort of golden rules as well. And if you think of it, is this a community? This should be fun. This has to be something that you really want to do. And it has to be something that you're a bit obsessed with. It's quite nerdy. So it has to be something that keeps you interested, because you have to sustain this if you're starting it. And that's where the format comes in. How are you going to format it? Are you going to just keep going week after week? Are you going to take breaks? We've decided in Talking Derry Girls to maybe take breaks after we've got 2 series, and we're coming near to the end of the 2nd series now. So we're already thinking, well, what do we do next? The 3rd series isn't going to be made for maybe into next year because of lockdown. So, do we keep it going? Do we have interviews? Do we tell more stories? Do we go back to Derry a bit more and record things? I'm based in Glasgow, and the other 2, one is in Belfast, Mary Louise in Belfast, and Jeannie is in Surrey. So, there's a bit of an effort for us to get back, but we've family and things there, so that's a good reason. But it's just all those kind of considerations. So that's a wee bit about the outline. I'm going to read you a quote just before we start. This is back in March, before we went into lockdown, and Derry Girls actor Nicola Coughlan, who plays Claire, you know who that is, she gave us all a warning on Twitter. She said, "I know that this time of isolation is hard and scary for people, but however bad you're feeling, please don't consider starting your own podcast." So ignore that. It's actually a bit of a golden era for starting podcasts, I think, because people have time. You've had time, time. You've got a bit of creative space to think about things. And it's been, actually, as we've discovered, it's really easy to talk to people anywhere in the world using Zoom or using like this. So recording that and doing something with it is an extension. So it's actually quite a good time. And the number of podcasts have doubled in 2 years. In 2018, there was I think it was something like, according to Apple, 550,000 podcasts. There's now over 1 million. In 2 years. So it's a very busy medium. The thing is, it's not it's not really competitive, because somebody's listening to a podcast. It's a bit like yours. Doesn't mean they're not going to listen to yours. People don't decide, I'm listening to this, so I'm not going to listen to that. So actually looking for something that's quite similar to what you're doing is a good way to find out what's out there. But also, could I do that slightly differently? How could I make that different? So, like, I'm going to go around you now. We've got about 10 minutes. We might overrun a wee bit, but is that okay with people? Yeah. Okay, that's great. Who will I go to first? Karis, I've got your notes here at top. So, hi.
Hello.
Hello. So, Karis, Sandstone Press, and just to start off, can you tell me very quickly, just a sentence for everybody else, what is it that why do you think you want to have a podcast for Sandstone Press?
Well, we're a small publisher and we work with a huge variety of really excellent storytellers, and really it's getting that storytelling into more people's hands or ears, I suppose, in this case.
Okay. I mean, a lot of publishers now are making their own podcasts, and some are even have been charging for content. So you've just even I think Richard Osman with his new book, Penguin Random House, put out a podcast and you could pay and get the book. So, you know, and in a way that has affected maybe him taking part in other, because they want to, you know, why if he goes on another podcast and then it's free, why would you pay? But I was just thinking about, and how do we look as well? Macmillan publishers have, and Berlin podcasts, Saraband have a podcast. And I think, I was looking at your list of authors. You have an amazing list of authors.
We really do.
Yeah, really good. And, you know, you've got people there who I know have done podcasts. So I was thinking, what could you do different? Rather than you saying, you know, you sort of said, you know, to get them on to be interviewed about their books and about their writing process. But why don't you, I was thinking, well, a good way would be to turn it on its head a bit and get them involved and create that community, maybe involving the authors, get them to buy in. I mean, do many of them do podcasts? Do you know?
We quite often pitch them for podcasts as part of the promotional process, but we haven't done, you know, producing a podcast for a specific book to celebrate that publication.
So you're really at the very beginning of just beginning to think about what could we do that would make it right. Because I had an idea, I was thinking about this and I was thinking, you know, what I like, I mean, if we think of storytelling, right? Podcasts are about people and relationships and community. They're about people telling stories to each other. And it's almost like you're earwigging in or something. I got one of the best comments I got about, I'll go back to Derry Girls again, is that somebody told me that they were sitting, it was like they were sitting behind the three of us on a bus, and they were just listening in to our stories and missed a few stops because they wanted to hear the end. And that to me went, oh wow, that is one of the best compliments you can have, you know. And I also produced the Tart Noir show, which is hosted by Therese Talbot. And one of the things we found in that surprised me, that has really taken off and is a big interest, is when the writer, the guest that we have, we ask them to recommend another book. So it's not to review the book. We're not doing a critique of the book. We're saying, what book would you like to talk about? So then I have tracked down the author, if they're still with us, and get them to record 2 minutes of them just reading into their phone, record into their phone, play it. And that has really, you know, sparked off a lot of comments on Twitter, especially saying people, I discovered new writers. I've never have found this writer, you know. So that's, again, it's the community. Social media is part of the community as well. But what I thought would be quite interesting, what I would like to hear is maybe, if I don't know, there's certain events that take place at book festivals, and one of them we had an extract from it in the Tart Noir show, and that was Desert Island Crooks, where you throw some writers together, give them a subject, and just tell them to get on with it. Now, your writers come from their range of experience, and what they write about, fiction and non-fiction, is amazing. You've got, you know, every kind of area of life. What about if you got them to sort of say, okay, three authors, pick them because maybe even their back catalogue a bit, and what they're not, maybe even what they're bringing, but say, okay, you're in charge of a children's nursery for the day, drawing on some of your characters and things like that. How would you do it? You know, surprise them a wee bit, but, you know, just get a different kind of, I'm just throwing that as an example, but, you know, get them to have fun with it. Because it's quite a commitment, but, you know, it shouldn't be just on one person to think about this podcast, because once it starts becoming a drag, that's when it's not going to work. That's when it's going to lose the energy and the sort of buzz of it. So I don't know, have you sort of had discussions within Sandstone about what you might do, or?
Very briefly. I think it's becoming more of an idea that we feel we could work with now, because our authors are so spread out geographically, and suddenly that doesn't feel like such a barrier.
Yes, because there was always a sort of pressure to get them together. But I mean, that'll continue. This will continue even when this pandemic is forgotten about. The people will be able to communicate, and you'll be able to record. And it's getting more sophisticated, and the quality is getting better. So I think probably, you know, if you think of the focus of it, as sort of we've been talking about, you know, how are you going to do it? I haven't mentioned content in any of this when I gave you those sort of guidelines, because content is something that will come from the conversations you have with people and what drives you, what excites you. It's almost like the focus is what gets you really excited when you talk about something, you know, what makes you laugh, what if you get a group of your authors together and they start sort of just riffing on something that's a bit surreal or something that's outrageous, what works? And they, you know, you could try that out maybe with a few, you know, get a few of them who maybe, you know, are a bit of experience doing podcasts, and just see, you know, a wee bit of thought into who you put together and that chemistry of how they work. So is there anything you want to, before I move on, ask me? Or
No, I think that could be really interesting. It kind of moves the onus of coming up with the interview questions onto the authors and gets them a bit more involved, I suppose.
Yeah. You want to get them excited about it.
Yeah.
That's the thing, because what you want to do is you want them tweeting about it, you want them talking about it, you want them, and word of mouth is almost the best way to let a thing to grow a bit, you know, organically. And to other people say, oh, have you heard? You must listen to this, and, you know, become part of the and also then it can spark off people being asked onto other podcasts, you know. So, you know, I know that you're thinking of, you know, your own publishing company, but, you know, it's no harm if somebody, just to invite them in, almost let them sneak in for a while, or, you know, and build that community of authors that do it. And you've got enough of a pool there to draw from, you know. So
yeah, I actually wondered, are we better off having a podcast that's a Sandstone podcast and looks at all of our authors, or taking particular books that we have a better idea of their particular audience, because obviously our audience varies hugely book by book.
Yeah.
And going more in depth with that.
I mean, that's another thing. I mean, you know, you could break it into seasons. So you could do a season on some of your non-fiction books, and do, you know, so you'd have maybe 6, and then sort of say, right, well, we're coming back, season 2 is going to be about this, you know. So you could do it that way, and you could break it into themes and have, but I would always advise, I mean, you know, you sort of, who's going to do the interview, who's your host for this? Are you going to have the same host? Those are kind of things to think about, and that comes into the sort of format of what you're thinking about. And sometimes it might be better just to have somebody introducing it, your intro and your outro, and just let people that are there sort of get on with it, with a bit of pre-production and a bit of talking, you know, guidance before, knowing your length and, you know, your sort of style. But that can vary. And with your name, what you want to do is, I suppose the motivation is to draw people to your website and to your books, you know. And maybe you could consider offering a discount or a small discount on a book if people have listened to the podcast. That way then you get a measure of who is listening and where, you know, if they're ordering the book. Okay.
Very helpful, thanks.
I think that's okay, thank you. Let's see. Brian? Hello, Brian.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, Brian, I did a wee bit of digging here, and I found an article. First of all, I suppose maybe I should get you to, I should get you just to do a couple of sentences about what you do, what
Sure.
the Games Network is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. My name's Brian Baglow. I look after the video games industry here in Scotland. I started the Scottish Games Network back in 2004, and since lockdown I've kind of jumped back into it, and I'm trying to sort out what seems to be an industry in distress. We have a bit of a misconception. Everyone looks at Rockstar North, who do Grand Theft Auto, and 4G Studios, who do Minecraft, and go, wow, this place is doing great. But when you scratch beneath the surface, you realise that actually the rest of the sector's really struggling.
Right.
We don't really understand what's going on. So I've just started a big project. I found some research funding to go and map the whole industry.
I've read that, and I mean that's really good, because I thought that research that you're carrying out, that was in Business Insider, I found it, and it's that sort of, if you think of the key things, okay, you say it's an industry in crisis, but Scotland, you know, has a global reputation of being a pioneer in gaming, you know, so you know that, so you've got that, you're a world leader, and so this research that you're doing, this massive piece of research, is that sort of a motivation for the podcast?
Yes, it's a catalyst. I've been thinking about doing this for a while. There are millions of podcasts around the world about video games.
Right.
Most are focused on the games themselves.
Right.
There are far, far fewer looking
Like
at
the
business side, the industry. And it's fascinating because it's really not very widely understood. You know, people tend to have a bit of a Willy Wonka thing going on. It's like you swan in about 10:30 in the morning, have a game of pinball, get a free Coke out the machine, do a little light programming, and then naff off for lunch. And it's not the case. You know, it's a branch of computer science. It's where the technology world meets the creative world. And there's so many different disciplines and so many different ways.
And applications as well, you know, sort of for education and health. So it's a big... what the challenge for you might be in this is to think, what is your focus? You know, what is the focus of this? Because you say there's a lot of games out there, but this is, you know, who's your audience? Who are you aiming? This is a business podcast?
Yes.
It is.
That's the way I'm looking at it, is I'm looking at people within the industry. I've been running the Scottish Games Network site for the last 16 years. I blog on a daily basis, news updates, stories, interviews, and so on, which is fine, but I need to branch out into multimedia. You know, I'm only about 6 or 7 years late, and you're
not the only one, don't worry.
There's a lot of really, really interesting people out there working this sector who you've never heard of. You know, for XpoNorth, there's a big game studio in Elgin in Murray, who are doing phenomenal work. And nobody's heard of them, you know, not even people outside Elgin. So pulling in some of these people and getting their stories, their journeys, how they've made it work.
So are you thinking of, would you be the host of this yourself, Brian?
I'm a gobshite, so, you know.
Okay, well, that's good credentials.
Can't get enough of my own voice. But being, sorry, all facetiousness aside, we don't have an awful lot of people in the games industry who are willing to do this, you know, and stand up and talk. Whereas I have no problem with that, and I love it, and I'm genuinely nosy. I want to find out more about people, more about their business, more about their games, how it works. And one of the issues that we've got, or we seem to have, is that we're losing talent. You know, we're losing so many people to, we don't know where. It could be other sectors, it could be overseas. We just, we're not entirely sure. So capturing some of these stories, capturing some of this experience and expertise, I think would be really, really valuable, but also really interesting. Not just for people working in the industry, but for all of the students who are studying this. We've now got 6 universities. Pretty much every college across the country is now producing games.
I did actually hear you on another podcast.
And another one last night.
Katie, you were on Katie's podcast.
I've just done Katie's podcast.
Yeah, I listened to that just to hear what just because it was, oh gosh, 2 people who are on this beginning, the 2 people who are on the start a podcast have made a podcast. But what stage are you at with this, Brian? Are you just thinking about it, or have you made a pilot yet, or have you?
I've been pondering it for a while. I'm using the research project as a catalyst to kick it off. I've just bought myself a brand new sexy microphone. It even changes colour on the bottom because, you know, it's video game. Throw a bone to the technology people. I've downloaded Audacity and installed that, and I'm planning. I've got the weekend to myself this week, and I'm planning to sit and just do 45 minutes, why I'm doing the mapping project, what it's all about, what I hope to do with the podcast, and really.
Are you going to record that? Because I
yes.
would recommend, yes, don't write. You could write it down, but just treat it almost like, right, I'm going to sit here in front of the mic, and I know it's all in my head, and this is what I'm going to do, and just do it. And I mean, it's not for anyone else, only for yourself, and it also lets you hear what your voice is like. It also gives you an idea of pace, and also then the next thing would be to get a couple of people to try to have a chat with. It sounds like could be an awful lot of work. Have you got a team? Have you got other people that can work on it with you? Because that's, if you think of the time, because this is the other thing about the reality of it, is the amount of time that it takes.
At the moment, no, but I have had several offers from people that I know who have said they could look after things like.
Can you buy in? Would you have the resources to be able to buy in an editor? So say you somebody's edited or something, or is that within your budget, or is
initially,
it just
initially I would be paying for it out my own pocket, but my goal would be to, at a certain point, essentially find a sponsor. Yes, there's a lot of companies out there across Scotland.
I think that's game for it, but also you have probably a very, you have a potential audience that's in the United States, Japan, and anywhere where gaming is a big, and the business of gaming is, so it's quite niche what you're talking about in a way, so
no illusions. I'm not.
But that's fine. Podcasting is good for niche. It works for that.
No, absolutely. But I was really intrigued what you said, Keris, about seasons. About series, because shifting focus from roles within the industry or industry journeys through to individual games, some of the old school games. I worked on the original Grand Theft Auto.
That's a story to start with. It's stories. What you need are stories. And as you say, there's people out there, and the story of that, the story of Lemmings, the story of, right from the very beginning, to get people to tell you that. And that's where you, as the interviewer, will draw those out and chat. And it's good to know the people, and for all of you, if you're going to interview somebody, is to have a chat with them beforehand, just to get a bit of chemistry, see what the chemistry's like, or even consider having two people having a conversation that you're sort of hosting is another way of doing it. So
and again, I've got pages and pages of notes of potential people who again, we've got so many people who will give monosyllabic answers, or who will just answer no more. So finding those people who can have that little bit of banter back and forward, a little more freewheeling.
But when you're doing your thing, if you think through those points that I had about those 5 things that I mentioned at the beginning, the why, the reality, what's the focus, the name of it really matters, and what's your format. And also think of seasons. I mean, in between the seasons, I wouldn't leave too long a gap, because you have to establish yourself and build up that community. But then you have to keep that community going while you're not doing something. So that's where social media and all comes in, and you get people wanting to know when you're coming back again is ultimately what you want.
That's exactly it. And one of the things I'm really keen to do with this is when I write for the website, it's broadcast. It's one way. And trying to get more of that engagement, more of that interaction coming back, so people can suggest topics that they want to hear about. What games in Scotland that came out in the last 5 years would you like to hear about in depth?
Well, and that sounds good. Was that useful? I hope that was useful for you. There might be some things that come up when I'm talking to the others as well.
It's always nice to have not just a sanity check, but to hear from somebody who's kind of been there and done that I'm not barking up the wrong tree.
No, not at all. Not at all. All right.
Completely bizarre lane. But that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem. Right, Katie, I'll move on to you next. Hello, Katie. So a sentence about where you are and what you've done, and your podcast you've started already.
I know, jumped the gun a little bit, Pauline, but I work for the University of the Highlands and Islands. I'm in a curriculum development, employer engagement role, so meeting with lots of really fascinating people across the region. I'm desperate to capture some of those conversations and share them with students. We've got students based as far north as Shetland, right down to Perth, so huge region. And our Careers and Employability Centre are always looking for ways to inspire those students, help them kind of consider their career as not as a problem, but as kind of an exciting opportunity, and be curious and creative in the way that they think about it. So the Future Me podcast launched earlier in the week. Completely, yes, we had Brian on as one of our speakers, which was brilliant. And yeah, quite excited, but we realised it's been a steep learning curve. I've got a team behind the scenes. We realised we've got a lot to improve on in series 2, but so far it's been well received.
Good, good. And did you launch everything at once?
We debated that, Pauline, and initially it was like we were going to have our weekly, podcast ready to go out, and the general consensus was we had a lot of students we knew would tune in because they'd be asked to by their programme leads, or they'd have a real keen interest in a certain speaker. So because we're covering such a broad range of subjects, we didn't want a student to go onto the podcast page and only see one, episode that wasn't suited to them.
I think you're right. I think for that, and that's, that I think that is, that was a good idea to launch that because of your audience that you're aiming it at, and also to give that range, so that it's almost a resource, isn't it? It's a resource for people thinking about their careers. I mean, is it aimed at a particular age group? That's what I was wondering. So, I'm thinking of, is it early 20s, late teens, early 20s, or is it, mature student, or, are you aiming at a general audience, or who's the audience you had in mind?
We have such a broad range of students, and because the University of Highlands Islands isn't just HE, as soon as you leave school right through to a doctorate, it's a really broad range. And I did have people challenge, saying it's not really a podcast, it's just a bunch of audio files currently on the website, soon to be on Spotify. But the aim is that come series 2 we could essentially launch each episode one after another, because we've already got a bank there. So
really what you've got is a big pilot for what you've done is you've got all this content, you put it together and you've put it out there. And I was interested to see, because I was wondering, I didn't have time to listen to all of them, but I just dipped in and out. I do like the tune, and I do like your sort of slogan, future, where I find it again? Yeah, but it's got look up. Was it look up,
look forward, be in the know?
Yes, I like that. It's very catchy, and then I forgot it, but I have it written down. But yeah, having that, and I take it that you're not having the same host all the time, you're having different hosts, so it's a completely different style. Almost each podcast could have its own style, maybe related to the subject you're covering. Is that?
Yeah, we have a team of us that are all focused on a different subject area. So mine is creative industries. The likes of John covers engineering in the built environment. So we thought we have an understanding of the subject that we're talking about to a certain extent. So therefore, we're probably more informed to have a conversation with the interviewee. So that's how we've started it, and it's really helped with the recording, which doesn't take too long, but the editing, which I've learned can take up to a day per episode.
Oh, easily. And what I did do was also look, I'm wondering, you've got a team within your group, but I'm wondering if there's any way that you can involve any of the other departments, like maybe you're doing this already, like you've got an audio engineering department. I mean, you give them raw material and say, go and make something that's really, what's the best sound we can get out of this? What's the best way we can get our stories out? I don't know if you've thought of that. You've got a performance, department as well, where people, so you could involve students a bit more in the making of it. And that would give them some experience of, because people who are doing audio engineering will maybe be thinking of, what they're going to do after they leave. I see a lot of it's theatre, film, but, sound is sound at the end of the day, wherever you're doing it. So, I just thought maybe that's an idea to get it a fresh, and maybe something that's going to, something, it's really good and it's good, but it's still people of a certain age giving information to people of a certain age. So you sort of have to think that intergenerational thing, which you could actually have a lot of fun with. There was one story in the first one which I thought, what? I want to hear more about that. And it was John being a funeral director. And it was almost like he gave a list of things, but I wanted to hear that story. So, I would have had that up at the top. How does somebody who's a funeral director end up doing this? So think of the stories, think of the way that somebody can make you go, what? You know, and the interaction, because I noticed as well that it was, you know, you asked a question and there was a long answer, and then there was another question. You want to maybe try and get it more conversational.
Yeah, that's really, really good feedback, and actually something that Brian too had kind of fed back on. We're very raw on the editing at the moment. We've got a lot to learn on that front, but trying to get the dynamic in a video call, it's there. It's sometimes the sound doesn't sound quite right. The microphone hasn't picked it up, and yeah, that's a challenge.
We'll record. This is something for everybody. When you're recording, see if you can make sure, and editing is an important bit of this as well, but if you can record in separate tracks. Do you record in separate tracks, do you know?
I don't think we have been, but it's something that our audio engineering guys suggested. Yeah.
We do it for Dairy Girls. We talk over each other a lot, and when I'm sitting down to edit it, I can then, you know, sort of fade out a bit or take a wee bit out so that it's not lost, but we're still sounding like we are talking over each other. So that's just something to consider. But in terms of content, you've got an audience, and it's just to make it, thinking for your next series, how do we make it so that it's entertaining as well? Really sort of something that, again, people will go to, and good stories, and just the weirdness of how people, and also maybe students, and what they imagine a job would be like. Or, you know, you could even have a bit where you're talking to school children or something, say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I mean, I wanted to work in radio from I was about 11, but I didn't know anybody that worked in radio. And my story is that my parents abandoned me outside Uganda House in Trafalgar Square the day that they broke relations in the 70s. And I was fascinated by all the people recording and cameras. And my mum said to the policeman, can you keep a wee eye on her and we'll be back in a few hours? So I was left abandoned in London, in Trafalgar Square. So that's my story of how I got interested in radio, because I was asking questions of all these journalists who were very good, you know, so that people are very generous about talking about how they got into things. So you could actually make it, you know, have lighter touches and, you know, just different shades in it. So
absolutely great ideas. Thank you so much.
No problem. Callum?
Hello.
Hello, Callum.
Hi, good to see you.
Yeah. Callum, you're a big fan of podcasts, I believe.
I am. I'm very, very new to the game. I'm actually theatre background-wise, so I'm kind of looking to branch out and explore different things with this.
So what stage are you at? And are you at college, or are you now working in theatre?
So I'm doing a master's at RCS. I'm a director and writer kind of by trade, but I want to kind of branch out into telling stories in a different way, in a more maybe conversational way. When I was in university before, my friends and I had a radio show called The Quarter Hour Spark, which was discussing something for 15 minutes and trying to make it as fun and witty as possible. Shockingly witty was our tagline. And it was very, very well received. I mean, we had people in France listening to us on like a local radio station. It was crazy. And it's the sort of thing that I really liked the idea. And my friend Bronwyn and I, we were sort of the hosts of it, and we got in new people every week. And because it could be anything, and it was that 15-minute cutoff, and you couldn't go past that. Mm-hmm. That was kind of an engaging shorthand format that took off, really.
Mm-hmm. And would you think, when was that? When did you do this?
That was back in 2016.
Right. So it was a sort of podcast that you were doing in a way.
Yeah. Well, we record for about 2 hours, and then you sort of chop them up into like 15-minute slots.
Oh, I see. Right. Okay.
And what was great as well is that you had the fact that you had all these in-jokes sort of from, you know, you've been chatting for 2 hours with your mates, and kind of things would loop back into each other. And when you get the right people, as you know, they just bounce back and forth, and it becomes very lively, which is fun to listen to.
Mm-hmm. See, and that's building community as well.
Absolutely.
When you've got in-jokes that run from one episode to the next, and then people start, you know, that are following you and on social media and start quoting the things to you, you know, that's when you know it's working. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, because you are building a community, you are from people from all, and it surprises you sometimes where people will come from to it, you know. But that idea, that's good to have. You've got I don't know if you're thinking of expanding on this and as the podcast, but maybe, you know, you could develop? I take it you did it for a while and now it's stopped, has it? Or?
Yeah, we had to stop basically because our courses got more and more intense,
Right.
and we had a 7 a.m. radio slot, which for a student wasn't always ideal.
But could you? Is it something? I mean, have you got an idea in mind what you want to do the podcast on, or do you think you could build on this?
So the idea, how we did it originally was we had people write us questions. And then what I would do as sort of the main host was I would number them, and then I would do a little bit of research on all of them, and then everyone else was kind of fresh to it. And then they'd pick a number between, say, 1 and 50 or whatever it was, and they'd get it. And we had to, whatever it was, you had to make it fun and interesting. And that kind of random, quite sporadic format worked really well. So I think if you did that, it could be about anything. And as you said before, about each episode effectively being in its own little podcast, combining that with a community of people liking the host and people liking the show itself, I think there's a lot of potential for it.
Yeah, it does sound like, because you mentioned some of the podcasts that you like, Imagined Life and things like that, where you have it's almost like a game show. I'm thinking of like What Works. I'm a big fan of Pointless. Not Richard Osman, and I remember thinking, what is it about Pointless that makes it different? Why am I engaged in this? And it's because he says, how did you get on at home with this? So he brings you in, and that I think is the trick, and that is what the golden nugget of that, or the eye of the duck if you're in the filming, it's what draws you into it. But he also I don't know, I listened to a couple of podcasts, but then I get a bit tired of celebrities doing podcasts. I think it gets a wee bit too much. But he did one about where you had to guess the age of somebody, or it was their birthday that day or something, and you had 3 people on and they had to guess what age they were, or something a trick, something like that that's entertaining. 15 minutes is good. I like that. Quarter Spark. That is a very, very good title, very strong title, and it's doable. It is something. So you've got, if I was going through that list, you've got your, I've lost my list now. You've got your why you were doing it. You've got the reality, so you know how long it would take. You've got the focus, and you've got a really great name, and you've got a format. So you'd have to now probably move on to the stage where I'm not going to cover today, because you're getting into thumbnails and the artwork and equipment and platform and things. So how would you sell this? How does it sit? And it's just a case of just listening to a lot of podcasts that do that, do the similar, and what makes you, and getting the right chemistry of people. That's
the main thing I was worried about personally, is about, we have all this free time now, but it's actually getting the kit, having the right gear, and then once you have it, how you kind of put it forward.
I think actually, in terms of kit, I wouldn't worry too much. You could actually do it on Clean Feed is quite good, which is what we use for recording remotely. I think there's a free version. It's a bit like Zoom, actually. You can do Zoom with the volume up. Quality can vary a bit, but you can actually, I get people to record into their phones. If you can get people to record, if you can connect with Zoom or something, or Messenger, this is how we do, I'll let you into a trick, how we do Dairy Girls is, we're all on Messenger, the 3 of us, we can see each other. So we've got our earbuds in for Messenger, but we're all recording locally. Okay. Order here. So, I've got, because I record for, but you could do this on your phone. You could do this on your, so I have this. So we all record locally. So and then that's in really good quality. And then they transfer me the tracks, and I knit them together. So it sounds like we're in the same room. In fact, the Big Light have said to me in times, we know that you're all in different countries, but how do you make it sound as if you're in the same room? That you're talking, because we see each other. So. And
you say, because I'm brilliant, obviously.
And wonderful editing, of course, but so you can do it, and you don't need to spend a fortune. Give a go. You can record onto your phone, and it's 15 minutes. It's not going to take up that much, so you can actually, there's also an app on the phone called Voice Recorder Pro or something, but it just depends. Sometimes it's just experimenting. Is it better using your earbuds and talking in? But just play around with that to see what sounds good. And you know, you can use your phone, but you can buy recorders. That's an expensive one. I mean, that was that was about 250 quid, but you can buy them at different. And people are quite forgiving at the minute about quality, you know, the sound of quality, you know, the quality sound, but it's good to try have that ambition to get the best quality. So don't spend a lot of money. Sorry.
Do you not feel with your phone though? Do you know, because I've done it before when I've been interviewing people, and you get all kinds of background noise, and it can completely kind of ruin or overlap the thing you want it to be.
Do you have a clothes horse for drying your clothes on? Do you have a duvet?
Yes. Do you under that?
Have you a corner in your room away from a window? Seriously, get a table, get the clothes horse up, buy another clothes horse, put duvets over it and create your own little studio. Put cushions around, soften the noise, soft furnishings. Never record near a window or in an echoey room with a high ceiling. Just find and also if you wear headphones, it cuts out, it acts as a bit of the sort of a microphone as well. So you can, but it's just a case of just experimenting. But seriously, you can create, you know, in a corner somewhere, and you know,
I think that's a key industry trip. Surely everyone needs to get on that and having clothes horses with duvets in their home.
Well, it's like using your ironing board as an adjustable desk. I mean, I can say that, you know. so I stand for a while and edit.
It's an excuse not to iron as well, which is great.
So, okay, Callum, I hope that's
great. Yeah, thank you so much, Pauline.
All right, great. Okay, and I've got Colin. Hi, Colin. Hello. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Colin, I had a look at your website, but tell us a wee bit. I thought it was good. There's some good stuff in there that you could play with for the podcast. But tell us a wee bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, how long have you all got? You know, the podcast thing came up, and I thought this is interesting because I started doing some video work, just video, because I'm a stained glass artist, so everything is visual. But what we find is, with myself, I work with my partner, and we work very well together. We work together, we live together, and people ask, how do you do it? We just do. And there's just a certain kind of, you know, kind of way we are with each other and way we are with other people as well. And that's one of the sort of essences that we would like to capture, is the stories. And it's not just about talking about what we do, talking about this is how I make a piece of stained glass, because it can get quite boring, you know, after a while. And the repetition, I suppose, you know, because doing podcasts is something, instead of doing blogs, I thought this would be really interesting to do it in voice, add some effects and what have you, involved other glass artists, so it's not monotonous, as you know, has been covered. But quite excited as to how it's going to go. I have 1,000 ideas.
Brilliant.
I have about 7 gigabytes of data with ideas, probably. That's a guess. But yeah, what you said about using like a Zoom recorder and that kind of thing, and I was kind of worried about sound quality. And at the end of the day, when you're saying that people are forgiving, you know, you listen to the radio, and not always on a radio show do you get pristine audio. You know, you'll get someone leans back from the microphone, and you know, but you'll either on a podcast you rewind it, and that's the trick as well, is because these are available to people, and the beauty of it is they can, oh, what was that was said there? They can come back to it before. So you maybe mention an artist. I watched the podcast with yourself and Jessica, and you were talking about Liam McIlvanney. So oh, just to catch the name again so you can go back. And that's such a magical thing that I think is going to be very useful for me.
Yeah, and having that, being able, I said, you know, to have it that people, it's always there, because, you know, radio, I mean, it's very different. I've worked in radio for years, and I've made documentaries. My background is as a news reporter basically, and a news producer. But I was working in Northern Ireland during the Troubles and things. But sort of when it came to when they got the Good Friday Agreement, and then as people were saying, we're going to become like Bristol. We're going to be. Are we losing our uniqueness? So there was all these sort of summer that was quiet, and they were saying. So it was me that used to get the crazy ideas. Could we have nude sunbathing in Donegal? Can you, Merzo, go off and come back tomorrow with a 3-minute pack on that? So, I'd head off to somewhere in Donegal, beautiful beaches, and just go to the priest. I went to the local priest and knocked on the door and said, what would you think if they started doing nude sunbathing in Donegal? And we got a fantastic story, so, and it went, and actually that story ended up being on, I think it ended up in Radio 4 and Radio 1. It was just the sort of as you say, just that, and it's that letting imagination and just your sort of to go with it. Where was I going with that? Yeah, but the sound quality. Yeah, I mean, I've made documentaries for Radio 4, and I've done, and for lots for Radio Scotland as well. And sound is important when you're doing that. But then you have the studios. I mean, you have the whole of the BBC resources behind you. You don't have that. So you work, and you do work to see the best sound quality you can get. But you can learn it. It takes time, and you can learn the basics of mixing or editing. But if you're doing, and if you know somebody, or if you knew somebody who's into it, and you could say a student or somebody, you could maybe give them some money or something, or a nice piece of glass to help you out, to teach you how to do that, or to do, because it's fun. It is fun. And the thing is, I think you're hitting on it. You've got a good relationship with your wife. I'm very glad to hear that. But you've got that, if you've got that chemistry that you can, I mean, I can almost hear like the glass house or something like that, where it's a domestic, you're talking about other stuff, but the thing you have in common is glass. Yeah. And I was remembering when I was reading your website and things about, I heard a lovely podcast. I sign up to this thing called The Listener, I think it's called, and they randomly send me 3 episodes of a podcast a day. It could be about anything. So one of them is about glass, but it's about the science of glass and the sand, and it's a lot of sound. It's very rich in sound. Now, then you're going into a whole different area of, you might find that that's something, if you're working with glass, you're interested in detail, you might find that you've got an interest in the sounds, that you hear. I mean, I'm one of these people that I hear things, I hear when I'm out, I hear things, I think, and I'm a bit of my thing is collecting sounds. So I'm always recording bits of, frogs and Virginia and trains and, Tennessee and stuff. So I've got a bank of sound. So that's something, just to think there is a lot of sound around, you say it's a visual thing. You can paint pictures with, on the radio, as they say.
Yeah, this is where the excitement comes in.
Yeah.
For me.
Well, I can hear the excitement. And one of the things is when you're thinking of the focus is what gets you, what I can see it in your face, I can hear it in your voice, what gets you excited, because that's the thing that will drive you to make it and keep you at it. It becomes the thing you do, it's sort of like that you look forward to doing it, and you get into the routine of doing it, and the stories come, and people will start telling you stories, and you can tell other people's stories. But there is a very good there is a podcast that has just come out, actually you might be interested in listening to. It's called Steffi and Chrissy Track and Trace Art. It's a new podcast. I actually know I know her. She's on social media, and I saw pictures of her with a recorder, and I said, "What are you up to?" And she goes, "Oh, you'd never guess." And then I found it, and that she is a glass artist.
Oh, right.
And if I was thinking of the focus of what they do, is they're looking at the pictures that you look at on social media that people put up, and they're getting the stories behind the picture. So they're going to the potter, or they're going to, so the stuff is on social media, and so they're taking it the next step to go and to find the person to talk to, and they've lots of rich sound in it. But I happen to know in that household there's a good sound engineer, or it's a person who works with sound, because I've worked with them in the past, so. But it's just to get an idea of what you can do, and just finding your own. And it could be, the team, the husband and wife team, you live in a glass house, you're letting people see what it's like, so you know, you just sort of think around that and think, how much do you want to tell about yourself, though? You know, it's like, it can be about all aspects of your life. It could be family, it can be community, it can be, and it's all built around glass. You know, it's, you know.
Yeah. Well, we also, I mean, we live in Oban too. We're on a seaside town, which is a beautiful place, fantastic place to live. Very difficult place to, you know, sort of keep things going. You know, and with podcasts, as you say, you do number one, you have number 1, 2 to do, and then 3, and then 4, and they come very successful.
Yeah, this is a good tip for all of you, and it's something that you've already done, Katie, is to do more, you know, to have them in the bag. So, you know, try and work ahead and have, you know, don't just start one and put it out and think, oh gosh, I've got the second one to do. Make your first 6, make your first 10 before you even put them out. And that's when I'm talking about intros and outros. I didn't really get into that, but that's because you can add them in later. You know, you can get the bulk of your and, you know, but the intros and outros, so that you can make it fresh, say something happens, or you can build a wee story. What we do with Talking Dairy Girls is we don't, you know, they always say, oh, you could have a little summary of what you're about and all the rest, but we, you know, once you know, we know the rules, so we threw them out a wee bit. So we have a little story, this less than a minute, that we take it in turns to come up with. It's based on the episode we're doing, so we sort of take a wee odd bit out of that and make a wee story out of it and write it, and it doesn't take us very long, but it's just to find something. But we sometimes add that in later on. We don't always have it, but we're trying to work 2 episodes ahead, just in case something happens. You know, say somebody can't do it one week, we don't have an episode. So always, it's, you know, you put them all out at once, but you wouldn't have to do that. You could have quite a few made. I think you've talked about doing that, Colin, and just Callum, you've talked about, you know, doing several, and then just, you know, put them out, because what consistency is what matters. You know, people come to expect the podcast to be out at a certain time. I listen to, anybody here fans of The West Wing, the TV program? Yeah. Do you know the podcast, The West Wing Weekly, that they did? Yeah, no. I was a massive fan with that, and I mean, that lasted, there was about over 100 episodes, so they did an episode a week, and that was sort of what it was in my head when we started thinking about Talking Dairy Girls. Was it to follow the episode and to get into detail and to, I mean, there's lots of stuff we haven't covered. We think we could actually go back and do the episodes again. That might get a bit boring for people, but, you know, it's just that consistency of keeping it and having something to work on. But that's, you know, they had that format, but it came out on a Wednesday, and that's what you knew. And if it wasn't out on a Wednesday, you know, you thought, well, what's wrong? You know, so you're building the habit with people. That might not be so much maybe in the case for the businessy type ones. You know, you could bring them out in a batch, which are very niche. But if you're wanting to just, if it's sort of entertaining, you know, I'm thinking actually of the book, you know, with you, with the sandstone idea, you know, you'd want to maybe have it come out on a regular basis, but you could build them up. You could do it, and you could build it around when people either are together or get them together virtually. So, you know, that's, and I mean, we didn't get into sort of duration and things, but with the good thing about podcasts is that they don't have to be 28 minutes, 30 seconds. If you're making a BBC Radio Scotland documentary, they have to be that. You can just let it run, and if there's something it's a freer conversational style, you know, so, and very natural. I think it's just to build on your own strengths and your own chat, or finding the people that can do that for you, you know, in your podcast.
Is there an ideal length of time that you would say would be right for a podcast, for example, with maybe sort of talking about one aspect of glass, and when you're saying about doing, say, 6 at a time, that makes sense also, because you have, you know, the continuity. But what length of time are we talking? Maybe 5 minutes or longer?
Oh no, I'd say you can do very quick ones, like the 15, you know, the quarter spark, which is built in, and that's nice. That's a good, nice little quick listen that somebody, a lot of people listen. We have to think where people listen. People at the minute are listening to podcasts when they're out for a walk, and a lot of people, and commutes. So commuting's maybe not happening so much at the minute as walking. So, I mean, I was worried a wee bit about the length of Talking Dairy Girls, because it was 50, I was aiming for about 50 minutes, but it's been creeping up to over the hour sometimes, but nobody's ever said to us that feels too long. I'm, as an editor, aware of that and keeping it back and just keeping it, and how many, you know, you want to give a bit of, for a listener, a bit of space, so you don't want too much, you know, so we hold stuff, I maybe edit stuff out and say, we'll keep that, we'll bring that up in the next episode, you know. I would say ideal length for something like that, maybe 20 minutes, right. 25, you know, 20 minutes is, you know, if you're talking about aspects of glass or something, and it's quite, you know, and it's, you get people to describe things, and you, to start off with, just go for that and see how it feels, you know, just something that's not 20-25 minutes.
Thank you.
You know, like Brian, if you had 3 or 4 people in a chat, it could be longer, you could be 40 minutes. You will know within a bit how long business people have to listen to something, and you want to do it when they're having a coffee break, or they're on their lunch, or they're commuting to work, or, you know, so that's, you sort of have to know the community you're playing to. Students, I would say probably half an hour, no more, you know. And for your books, for the authors, you could actually go a bit longer. You could go 45 minutes, 50 minutes with that. If you think of the number of people you have talking in it, you know, if you have 3 people, you know, and you divide out the time. So if you had 3 people, 30 minutes, that's 10 minutes each, sort of thing, you know. It's almost like if you're balancing what you're hearing. And also, you know, the longer, you know, you sort of think the texture of something, you know, you might have music that you use. One thing about music, you can never ever use commercial music in a podcast. Never. It has to be original music, or you can go and find royalty-free music.
I was actually thinking about that. I was a professional musician for many years. I'm not a virtuoso, but I'm wanting to use my own music and effects and that kind of thing. But what I was considering as well is maybe sort of like making some of the music and sort of incidental music and what have you, sound bites, available free for folk to download, you know, just to, you know, where, you know, royalty free sites, you know, they're probably not as, you know, fruitful as people would like. So that's something I was sort of thinking about. Do you think that would be...
I would, well, you could, I mean, it's your music at the end of the day. If you're doing your own arrangements and making your own music, you don't want people, you know, you could make it, that would be very generous, but you could also register it, and so that if people want to use it and pick up, that they would have to, you would get something for it. The music that we did, this is something we, again, we were thinking about music for Talking Dairy Girls, and we did actually sort of at one time think, you know, we were thinking undertones, we were thinking, but we wanted that sort of sound. But so what I did was I just went looking and found what Irish tunes are royalty or out of copyright, because that's the other thing. The London Derriere, Danny Boy, is out of copyright, and it's about where we're from, and it just so happens that one of the Dairy Girls' husband is a musician. So we said to him, could you take Dairy Girls and make it sound as if it was recorded, sort of like in a grungy sort of pop 90s sort of way? So he did, and then, you know, so that was it. So that was how we got the music, and it didn't cost us anything. And he's done this so we've got a bossa nova version, we've got a quieter version, we've got a disco version. So, you know, we just sort of change them around a wee bit. But yeah, it's, if you've got the background in music and you can sort of come up with your own music, it can be very simple. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have music. It can make it, you know, it can just give you a wee age of, you know. Katie, how did you get your music?
We had our sound audio engineering team up at North Highland College got involved at very last minute. We gave them the words and they turned it around for us, which was nice to bring in.
Yeah, and you could actually get, you know, that's what I'm saying about using your audio people and just giving them some experience of editing for you. Why not? You know, make it sort of, I don't know if they get any student credit for it, but it could just get them involved and build up and give them some, you know, something to work with that they can then actually hear go out, you know, and so.
Absolutely,
yeah. So I think our time is nearly up, but if there's any questions, anybody else, we've got a few minutes. Haven't kicked us off yet. Are you kicking us off?
I don't want to be the harbinger of death on workshops, but we are running out of time. Pauline, you've been so great. Thank you so much.
Right. Just I hope it was something of use.
That was great, and we might continue some workshops in the future. So it'd be really interesting to check back with you guys, see how your podcasts are going, and get some follow up.
If there's anything that I mentioned that you want to, I mentioned that podcast and things for you, Colin. You know that it's track and trace art or something like that. So anything. If you send an email, I can give you the information. Okay.
I have just one very quick question. It's so on the name, I've got 2 domains that I've kind of been sitting on, and I would really love your feedback. So one is just called Rhubarb, and it's RHUBRB, so a bit Silicon Valley, you drop the last vowel. And the other one is Square Go, which is a Scottish term which means having a bit of a fight, you know.
Right. A Square Go.
Yeah, and the nice thing is I've got, so the squarego.net, square-go, which is SGN, which is the same as the Scottish Games Network.
Yes.
I would do that one.
Yeah.
You
I'm
do?
inclined, yeah.
Okay. I'll keep Rhubarb for something else fiendish then. Thank you, that was it.
No, and Katie, I wanted to mention your name actually, and I forgot about this, Future Me. When I did a search on Future Me, there was a few Future Me's came up, and there's a Future You, but I think having that little tag on that, look up, look out, look forward, look whatever, but something like that, because that's the thing. If you're thinking of a name, do a really good search to make sure that nobody else is using it. So because you don't want to get confused with somebody else, because there is a Future Me that is about upskilling for women for work environment.
Yeah, I did spot that, and the only reason we went with the Future Me was because our internal platform that students use is called Future Me, so it kind of kept it consistent.
I mean, it's not, it's just something to be aware of. It's not, I'm not saying don't ever use something that somebody else, there's no rule against it. There's lots of podcasts have the same names, but it's just so that it doesn't get confused, you might want to think about that, but that's it. Okay.
Well, if anybody has any further questions, just please pass them on to us and we can connect you with Pauline. And also, if you do create a podcast, please send it our way so we can help promote it.
Yes. Yeah.
But Pauline, thank you very, very
no
much.
problem. Thank you. Thanks for asking me. It was great fun. Really enjoyed it.
It's been really, really good. It's been really useful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, folks.
All
Cheers.
right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much indeed.